Welcome to this short video, an overview of course design tools. I'm Shamini Dias. We're going to look at two taxonomies by Bloom and Fink. Before we begin, some frameworks. A good way to think of your student learning outcomes, SLOs, are through the metaphor of a journey. If your course is a learning journey, the SLOs are the destinations toward which we support our learners to reach. They are important parts of our map or course design. Pause for a moment to reflect. What are the destinations you envision for your course learning journey? Think about content knowledge and related skills. Make a list. Think about going beyond this. Imagine your students 10 years out in the future. What 2 to 3 critical capacities for flourishing in their future could you set as goals to achieve in your course? For example, in teaching statistics, a capacity goal might be to ensure they are able to think ethically about the use of data in different work and community settings. Or in teaching any number of subjects, a capacity goal might be to ensure students develop the ability to think from multiple perspectives or interpersonal skills. Also consider how your goals connect with your philosophy and pedagogy. The more aligned they are, the stronger your design. In thinking of your course as a journey that helps students master content knowledge while also developing capacities to flourish in the future, we move from a transmission model of education, of content delivery, toward an engagement model of education based on co-creative work with our learners to actively build knowledge and capacities and to give them agency. All right, now let's meet some useful tools and taxonomies to develop SLOs as destinations for your learning journey. The first thing to know before we dive in is that SLOs should be written in transparent, active learning that makes the intended learning visible. The question you want to ask yourself is, by the end of the course, what will students be able to do and know? And how will you and your students see visible signs of goal achievement? How will they know by reading the SLOs, the indicators that will tell them they've arrived at destinations? So let's take a look at Bloom's cognitive taxonomy. This is the most widely known tool for course design. It's used by educators to craft learning outcomes based on these different levels of cognitive processing. On the right, you see the revised model developed in 2001 by Crethwell and Anderson. You can download the document linked on the slides to read in more detail about each of these levels. For now, just think of these as dimensions or types of cognitive processes you want to use to guide your SLO determination. Will your course engage learners in these different cognitive processes? Now, Bloom's taxonomy, as in the previous slide, assumes hierarchy. One moves through the levels from lower order to higher order thinking. Now, this makes sense when we primarily use transmission methods of teaching from teacher to learner. But moving to the engagement and active learning model of teaching, we can work less hierarchically as shown in this slide. We can lead students to know and remember, to understand, which is at the bottom of the original model, by working experientially at the create or analyze levels. An example, by experientially exploring a community's history through interviewing elders and creating video narratives, students work inductively to understand the process of history and cultural change. So here, the know and remember levels are mastered through analysis and creation. So don't limit yourself to lower order processes of know and understand, even in your intro classes. This is a really useful tool in crafting good SLOs. They're active verbs corresponding to the different levels of Bloom's taxonomy that are right in the middle there. And this is a really good way to think of active processes and active learning tasks and assignments that will help learners achieve whatever SLO you are crafting. Here we go a little deeper, granulating Bloom's taxonomy to look at the significant difference marked by the blue line, separating understand and remember from the other cognitive processes. This is a good design checkpoint slide to pause and think. Are most of your goals and outcomes connected with just the lower dimensions? Do you have goals and outcomes where students will be able to engage in applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating as part of their learning process? Remember again, even in an intro class, especially maybe in intro courses, you will more easily engage learners if your SLOs go beyond remember and understand. I don't know if you have seen this one before. The remember and understand dimensions of learning are radically different now that learners have access to multiple sources of information. Google's taken care of that in many ways. It also reminds us that we can invite and integrate information and the knowledge world beyond our textbooks and classrooms to bring in our students' lives and interests as we design courses. Now, this is another useful tool in that regard of the world of the digital spaces of information and knowledge. This is a digital layer added to Bloom's taxonomy devised by Andrew Churches from New Zealand. You see Bloom's dimensions on the left. In the middle, there is a useful bunch of verbs that speak to specific digital processes like blogging, video logs, video casting, podcasting. And at the far right, the yellow box has verbs connected with communication and collaboration like negotiate, moderate, post, contribute, etc. I find this model particularly useful as a reminder of the many opportunities for multimodal teaching and learning and how important this is for our learners in a world where digital information and knowledge intersect in complex ways with the analog or physical world. These digital processes not only work in a completely digital space, but you can actually integrate them as digital processes in non-digital, on-the-ground classrooms. So as you write your SLOs, you want to also think of the digital dimension. And now, let's take a look at Think. It's less known. It was only published first in 2004. As you can see in the diagram, the green dimensions here, foundational knowledge, application, integration, are connected and overlap with Bloom's taxonomy. Although Think does granulate this more in bringing in the idea of moving beyond textbooks, breaking classroom walls, and integrating people and realms of life with practice, with project management. So he's really wanting to make the learning significant. These engage students in active work that builds autonomy, competence, and relatedness, which fosters growth mindset and self-determination. The really interesting pieces that Bloom brought in are these areas in blue: human dimension, caring, and learning how to learn. So I want to actually spend a little bit more time on this. Caring is about learners developing values and meaning in relation to what they are learning. They come to care about the subject matter, which of course helps them learn more deeply. The human dimension. This is about helping learners learn about themselves and about other people. It brings in the social, communicative, collaborative dimensions of learning. It brings in an appreciation for multiple perspectives and plural thinking. Learning how to learn. Now, this concerns a really important capacity we want to build in our learners, the ability to become self-aware about how they learn so that they can develop lifelong learning skills. These dimensions of Think's taxonomy help us think about learning outcomes that are focused on the deeper development of the learner. In fact, in how we think about and design our courses in holistic, meaningful ways, we can add learning outcomes based on Think's taxonomy that address these self-development and definitely future-focused outcomes for our learners. So Think's taxonomy is something that you really want to give some thought to in designing your courses before you sit down and write out all your SLOs. So here are some examples of the Think's taxonomy SLOs. Each of these can be connected with work processes in the course that actively, meaningfully connect to students' lived experiences in and outside of class. Now, these three areas are very, very much like Bloom's, as you can see from these learning outcomes or goals: foundational knowledge, application, integration, recall key authors, identify characteristics of postmodern picture books, analyze and evaluate key characteristics. With integrate, you have connecting postmodern picture books with trends in filmmaking and art. That would be interesting. Show how they support literacy principles. So the kind of outcomes you might craft with Bloom's taxonomy, very similar. But here you see the less common, the more unusual elements from Fink's taxonomy. Caring. To support rhetorical arguments, say in a writing course, with examples from their local communities, right? Helping them connect to their lived experiences, to gather and analyze descriptive data from local and global sources. So you come to care for the subject because the material becomes something that matters to you. Human dimension. Critically introspect and write journal entries on personal strengths. This could be in any course. Write a self and team collaboration reflection based on project work, if you're doing project-based learning. Learning how to learn. Develop a learning plan to support writing development. Use feedback to document work improvement. So this builds in the metacognitive levels of learning as an explicit outcome for any course. Now, this is a useful resource. It's kind of a set of guidelines or a rubric, if you will, for developing good SLOs. It's been around for a long time. A word about measurable and results-oriented. Think of it more as making learning visible rather than measuring and judging learners. That's one of the items in this SMARTer rubric, or SMART sometimes, where people say, well, I can't always measure my outcome, right? So think of measurable as meaningful, but also think of it as visible. Remember, the course is a journey towards destinations and the flexibility and the emergent nature of journeys. So what we are after with this criteria of measurable is, do you have formative ways to help learners see what they are learning to gauge their progress? Have you written your SLO in a way that makes students know, I see what I'm trying to achieve, right? And there are ways that you can achieve that. So let's take a look at two examples that have something to do with that idea. So this is a typical SLO. Students will understand Victorian social context through a study of literary text from the period. But understand, how is that measurable? How is that visible? What does that mean? In blue, you see a rewrite. Students will be able to analyze Victorian literary text to explain Victorian social issues. So now the student knows, okay, if I can do this, I understand. Same thing, students will be able to work collaboratively on a team. Not very visible, measurable. But I can gauge my ability if I can do any of the three written in blue. That I'm able to make contributions in a timely manner, that I can discriminate and justify ideas in constructive peer review, that I know how to lead team discussions in an inclusive way. Now I know that I can work collaboratively. So that's what we mean with that particular word, the troublesome word of measurable. Now that was a quick tour, and to wrap up our overview of the tools, the taxonomies for SLOs, reflect again on the journey metaphor and SLOs as the destination you want to transparently and clearly state for your students as you begin the journey. I wish you the best of luck in your course design, and in particular writing student learning outcomes that are clear and transparent and specific for your students.